All right, so outside of basic concepts and principles related to the brain, how it functions, we also want to look at the brain itself and its physical structure. Like, what are its different parts and how they connect with each other. All right, so generally speaking, we're going to take everything with the brain and break it into three key areas. All right, so we have what's called the cerebral cortex, which is everything kind of up top. All right, the actual brain itself that you think of. As far as like the pink thing with all the wrinkles. Although, side note, it's not really pink. All right, so, but that thing up top, all right, we're going to call that the cerebral cortex. Okay, and then at the very bottom, we have what's called the brain stem. Right, so this is the bottom part of the brain as it connects with the spinal cord. Right, so that's the connection point. And then we have something called the midbrain. This is kind of the section that's in between those two. Right, and oftentimes it will include things like the limbic system, kind of the in-between part. Okay. Primarily what we want to focus on is what's happening up top with the cerebral cortex. Right, so this is where, again, you have all the folds and wrinkles of the brain, and with that, it's broken into four key lobes. Right, so, and these are lobes that are on both sides. So, for example, one of the primary ones that we look at is the frontal lobe right here in the front. Right, so you have a right frontal lobe and you have a left frontal lobe. Okay. All right, so this frontal lobe is responsible for a lot of kind of like who you are as a person. All right, so we can see higher order and levels of thinking, things that are involved with planning and forethought and just controlling our movements and kind of like planning those things out. Logic, reasoning, impulse control, decision making, your concept of who you are, your personality, a lot of our memories, us trying to control our attention, like all these key things that we rely on a day-to-day basis and help us kind of organize information and process through everything. That's our frontal lobe, right? And there's a lot going on there. One of the other ones that we're going to see is the temporal lobe, right? So it's kind of right here along the side, right near our temporals. So temporal lobe, temples, okay? And yes, it does quite a few different things. One of the primary functions that we're going to associate it with, and again, this is not the only thing that it does, it's just one of the key things that it does, is that it helps process our hearing. Okay, so anything that we receive through our sense of hearing, that information is processed there. And kind of what we said with brain concepts, everything is reversed. So anything I hear with my left ear is processed by my right temporal lobe and vice versa. Okay. All right, moving back towards the back, we have our occipital lobe. Okay, and this part of our brain is, again, does many things. One of the primary functions that it's most associated with is processing our vision. Okay, and again, like before, everything is just reversed as far as what side controls the information from which eye. Okay, so frontal lobe in the front, temporal lobe here along the side, occipital lobe in the back, and we finish with our parietal lobe up here on top. Okay, and so a parietal lobe, again, does quite a few different things. One of the things that we want to associate with it the most, though, is that this is where a lot of our senses are processed. Right, so your sense of taste, sense of touch, and everything, these are where kind of the different areas that are specifically dedicated for that are located. Okay. Now, that's kind of the cerebral cortex. When we look at the brain stem, this right here, it's responsible for a lot of our basic functions that kind of keep us alive. This is why it's kind of more kind of nestled in and protected. So it connects to the actual spinal cord itself. And then some of the other key structures that we're going to see here are the cerebellum. This is kind of this ugly looking thing kind of at the bottom of our brain, almost like looks like a little mini brain. We have the medulla and also the pons. Okay, so when we look at the cerebellum, okay, one of the things that it does, it helps coordinate our movements and helps kind of keep things in balance for us. All right, so as we move around and everything, a lot of it's kind of being processed there as it's being controlled by the brain. Then it gets sent to the cerebellum to kind of execute it, if you will. And then again, also just kind of keeping us in balance, right? Now the pons also helps coordinate some of that information from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere as it goes down and needs to be processed by the different parts of the body. In the medulla, this is what helps us breathe and helps our heart rate and things like that keep moving. So if you damage that, then yeah, you're dead. All right. But the medulla helps us breathe without thinking about it, helps our heart beat without thinking about it. So it's really nice. Okay. All right. So that's the cerebral cortex, the brainstem, and then in the middle with the midbrain, you have the limbic system. All right. So limbic is a Latin word meaning border. All right. So it borders on and in between those two systems. And this is where we're going to get a lot of the smaller areas that are very specific functioning. So this is like the thalamus, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the amygdala, different things like that. So some of the things that we're going to see here is that these specific parts are critical for learning and helping us kind of encode new information. Part of that's going to be with memory and then also just emotional processing. Right? So the emotions a lot of times are being kind of processed here, and then the frontal lobe will come in and help us kind of hopefully have control over those emotions as we look at things like impulse control. Okay. So again, those are just some of the key areas that we want to be familiar with: cerebral cortex, brainstem, and everything with the midbrain, including the limbic system.